Welcome to episode 41 of What Happens Next, the podcast designed to get you ready for the next chapter of your life, regardless of what it includes. And in this video, I'm really pleased to be introducing an amazing guy, author, speaker, Will Rainey. Now, Will was originally from the UK, but now he lives and works in Asia. After a pivotal moment when a client said to him, enjoy the time with your kids because they only grow up once. Certainly something that we've probably all experienced throughout our lives. And that motivated him and his wife in 2019 to leave their corporate jobs, start their own thing, and move from the UK to Hong Kong and then eventually to Vietnam. In this interview, we cover off what we can teach our kids and grandkids about money and what the lessons that Will learned along the way to help inform him about his life. We also talk about the journey he's been through to manage change and change his lifestyle, particularly moving internationally, and why defining your what happens next is really important, particularly if you're thinking about international travel as part of the next chapter of your life. I certainly know it's going to be part of mine, and Will highlights the fact that living in a place as a resident is a little bit different to being a tourist, so important to make that transition. Will also talks about the Diderot effect, a really interesting concept where acquiring one new item, like a new chair for your lounge, can lead to a cascade of further purchases because everything then feels out of place. It's really interesting. He also talks about getting positive role models, both for your kids, grandkids, but also for you, and highlighting that we are under constant change. So I think this is an amazing interview, not only for you, but also to help you educate the next generations in your family about money and life. Hopefully you enjoy it. Good morning and welcome to What Happens Next. The channel, I don't know, I'm still trying to work out what I call it. The channel and LinkedIn Live and the project, that's what I'm going to call it. The project designed to help you navigate what happens next in your life and have nuanced conversations about some of the challenges we might face in our lives when we've spent decades building a career and we find ourselves in that transition of change, but actually a traditional retirement might not be what we're looking to do. And I'm really pleased today to be joined by Will. Will, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Very good. I'm excited to be here.
We're really excited to have you, mate. And part of the conversation is going to be about financial well-being, which is where Will's particularly around teaching our kids, and if you're watching this, maybe grandkids, about sort of the lessons of money. But also I'm fascinated to dig a bit deeper into the changes Will's made in his life and how he's navigated what happens next and sort of exploring some of that. So I know all about you, Will, but for the benefit of the audience who don't, tell us a bit about you.
Sure. So I'm from the UK, but I haven't actually lived in the UK now for nearly 10 years. So when I was in the UK, I was working as an investment consultant. So I was advising some of the large retirement funds on how to manage their investments, so dealing with like trustees. And then I moved in 2014 with my company to Hong Kong. So I was the head of investment strategy, doing a similar kind of work, but working with like insurance companies and some of the governments all across Asia, which was fantastic, going to all these different countries and learning about different Asian cultures as part of my role. And I really enjoyed that. And then in 2000, whilst I was working, it's around 2017, someone said to me, and I was just talking to one of my clients, and they said, enjoy this time with your kids. They only grow up once. And it's a very kind of obvious statement, but had a big impact on me. And I said, I want to make more time for my kids. So so I said to my wife, and then, 2019, we both left our corporate jobs and moved from Hong Kong to a small place called Hoi An in Vietnam, which is like one of the best places in the world in my mind, to spend more time with the kids. So the kids went to international school, and so whilst they were at school, I wanted to have a side project, and I felt very, very fortunate to be able to take that time off to have that. And I was like, right, I want my kids to have that same opportunity. So I'm going to teach my kids now about money. So when I was putting them to bed, I would kind of create a little story, because I used to always tell them stories from make stories up. I wasn't a read a book. That was my wife would read a book and I would just make up a story. And I was like, I'm going to put a little bit of a money spin on it. And they really enjoyed it. Even when my youngest was only about 4 years old at the time. And then I started sharing those stories with friends and family, and then started writing them in a blog. And it kind of just grew. So I just kind of developed this kind of passion for helping other parents teach their kids about money. And so, started writing a book. So Grandpa's Fortune Fables. I've been doing workshops with companies all around the world to help them teach kids. And it's been really good, because whilst I'm helping parents teach the kids about money, so it's kind of focused on the kids, actually lots of parents have said, I've learned a lot just by going through that kind of process.
It's really interesting. I've got a few questions actually, but I just want to share something. My two are 20 and 12 now, so they're a little bit older now. But my 12-year-old has been talking to me about this Australian kids show that's, I think, designed for younger kids, called Bluey, right?
Oh.
So this show is like it's about a family of dogs. And it's like sort of the kids are like 6 and 7, and she's like, Dad, you've got to watch it. It's not a kid's show. It's not a kid's show. You've got to watch it. And I was like, oh, come on, Sophie. It's like, so anyway, she sat me down a few weeks ago and made me watch a half hour of this show. And what they've done, Will, that's really interesting, they've snuck life lessons into these really palatable, colourful, friendly stories for kids. And anybody can access to it. So there was one the other day that was straight out of Stoic philosophy that they'd put into this really palatable story. And like, as you say, changing the concepts of these stories so you explain it in a way that's simple doesn't only mean the kids learn, it means that everybody learns, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Great. And it's
love that. Where did your money lessons come from?
So I kind of worked in a bit of the industry, but a couple of bits. One was actually reading books. So reading some of the sort of famous financial education books, so like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Richest Man in Babylon, even stuff like the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. So even though I'd kind of worked in the industry, it took sort of these extra books and these stories to go, actually, right, I kind of put the actions and the knowledge together. But I was also very lucky about my parents as well. So whilst my parents, I don't remember my parents giving me money lessons, but my parents paid off their mortgage. They had quite relatively early. And so when I finished university, so my sister's older, so she finished early. Pretty much 21, my parents said, right, we're retiring, we're going to go to Spain. And so they split. Again, they had good jobs, but not like crazy good jobs. But relative to their peers, they were like, that was their goal. They wanted to retire early and move to Spain. And so whenever I was phoning up my parents, so after I finished doing a new graduate job, so I was working like long hours and saying, I've been working hard. My parents have been, we just went to this lovely little village. We painted a chair. I want to do what you're doing. So again, they're kind of, how did they manage to do that?
Good role model, really, right?
Yeah, so I was very, very lucky. And similar to my wife's parents, they were very conscious and good savers. So my wife and I kind of adopted that as well. So we have been saving and investing for quite a while. And again, that gave us kind of the opportunity, and hence I realized that's so powerful, and hence why I wanted to make sure my kids learn about money as they're growing up.
Yeah. And it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because like you hear about that element of, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, where often if somebody's built financial independence or wealth, their kids and particularly their grandkids don't follow the same lessons because they're not in that similar sort of environment. So how do you how do you think you stop that issue and make sure that the kids learn the same lessons as you did and your mum and dad did?
Yeah. So as I've been writing these different blogs, and I love real world stories, and so one of the ones that I was reading about was the Vanderbilt's family. So this is, for those who don't know, it's one of the richest families that ever existed in the sort of late 1800s. And so he owned the sort of Cornelius Vanderbilt. He built this kind of family dynasty with the sort of railways in the US. But within kind of 3 generations, they lost all of their money. Not lost it all, but there's not like a millionaire amongst them. And that was because they got all the money, but they never passed down how to look after that money. And so it's very extreme, but I kind of had that mindset of, right, I want to make sure that my kids, there's no point in me having it and spoiling them. I wanted them to sort of grow up, understand how to look after their money.
So we're like, sort of, if I look at my life, we're probably first generation wealth. Like, so my mum and dad didn't have it, and interestingly, I consider myself lucky because probably from my mum and dad learned lessons that I shouldn't do, but then looked at that and went, "Oh, that's interesting." So I think it's probably the opposite for me. But the interesting thing is wanting to give your kids the opportunity, but making sure they understand the sacrifice and the life lessons that go with it. And it's an interesting one, isn't it? So you mentioned very briefly at the start about your book, Grandpa's Fortune Fables. Tell me about how it's gone down, and I suppose the big one is, what's your favourite story in the book?
Oh, right. Good question. Right. So, so a bit about the book first. So the book started, like the basis of it, I was just writing these little stories as I was writing this blog. And then over a while, there's lots of little stories. And people was like, oh, you should make it into a book. So I did. And so the book's essentially taking some, as I mentioned, I really like books like The Richest Man in Babylon. And when I was reading that, I was like, I wish I'd have learned this when I was younger. So that was like the kind of basis of, right, I'm going to make a book that's like that, but for kids. And so, the book kind of goes on this journey through 14 chapters of this sort of grandpa learning from starting off poor, trying to get rich quickly, and that doesn't work out for him. And he kind of gradually learns how to build wealth. And there's other characters in the book. But the story that I like most is probably one called Mr. Lazy. And it's called Mr. Lazy's Tree. So throughout the book, it uses like money being like seeds. And so they're kids to try and grow this forest, and grandpa does. And one of the stories is they're trying to work out how do they grow these biggest trees. And so going around this kind of faraway island and finding these big trees and finding out, right, how did they grow them? But every time they went around to find out, right, who owns this tree and how did they grow it? They were like, the person didn't know they had the tree, like, oh, I didn't realize I've forgotten about that tree, or the person had died and it was a really powerful story because it essentially shows about patience and about actually, if you want to grow wealth, you kind of don't know. And it's actually based on, I think it's a real, it's one of these kind of semi-real world, like it's, no one knows the actual original story, but it's kind of made into that. So I think it was like JP Morgan did a study on like their investors and said, right, which of our customers have done really well over the last 20 years?
I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. I know that when I conducted the interview, I learned loads. And I always learn loads from listening to people who have expertise in a particular area, so I can share it with you to help you with your What Happens Next journey. Now, currently, I'm writing the What Happens Next book. It's nearly done. I'm still working hard. It's due to be released in 2025. And to be on the waiting list, so you're one of the first people to get access to the book, simply visit whathappensnext.life/book.
And then when they researched it, it was people who had forgotten their passwords, forgot they had the investments, or had died. Essentially, they hadn't got anything,
right? Yeah.
Allowed money to grow over time without getting all the sort of ups and downs with the investments and stuff like that. And so that was a really good story, and people like it because they can kind of see what happens, and they like the character Mr. Lazy.
it's interesting when I think about that story in relation to our clients during the pandemic. And I don't know if I've told you the story before, but lockdown one happened in the UK. We closed the office, sent the team home, set up a home office, and I made the schoolboy error of because I've got a bit of an outbuilding in my place that used to be the office before we moved out. So when we moved out of that office and went to a sort of separate space, I turned the Wi-Fi off because why would I ever need it again, Will? And then a lockdown and a pandemic happened, and I was really desperate to have the Wi-Fi, but I couldn't get anybody out to do it. So I'm working from my lounge. I'm working from my front room. Kids are being homeschooled, and I thought it'd be a really good idea during lockdown one to phone all my clients and make sure they were okay. So just phone and go, look, I know this is a tough time. I want to give you an update. Here's where we are. One client described that as the Joey Tribbiani call. And I went, well, what do you mean? He went, are you phoning everybody and just going, how are you doing? And I thought that was brilliant. So end of lockdown one, I've walked into the lounge and the kids are just like absolutely over themselves laughing. And I said, what am I missing? What's so funny? And they went, have you seen the fridge? So I walked around, went into the kitchen, and on the fridge, like on the magnet, they've put this thing called Dad Bingo, right? So what they've been doing, because I've been on the phone to all these clients, just having these, I've been repeating stuff to every client. And what they've been doing is just like going, oh, you said that again. Like a tally sheet of like how many times I've said it. And what was interesting is the phrase. I was reading a lot of Stoicism at the time as well. The phrase that I repeated most during lockdown one was "This too shall pass," and it was that element of just going, look, it feels scary, it feels different, it feels unusual, but we're not doing anything. Actually, playing now is going to be a mistake. We know the sort of long-term nature of that stuff. And I tell that story quite a lot because knowing that actually you've got somebody on your side to help you go, look, let's not take any reaction at the minute because we know the long-term nature of that is really important.
Just on that, because I think that's why I love talking to my kids about their money and stuff, especially because we do invest it. I'm thinking at the time they're like 18 or 21, whenever they want to start investing for themselves, that they would have seen these ups and downs because they've already seen like the COVID one already, and they're probably going to see one whenever before they turn 18. They're only sort of 9 and 11 at the moment. I feel that's going to be such a superpower when they get to that age, they're investing for themselves and they go, oh, I've seen this already before. I'm not going to get over worried about these ups. Whereas I think most adults, especially when they're going to start investing, that first time that the market goes down and it's like, so I'm really hoping that kids and whoever reads the books will again have that.
And I think the interesting thing is communicating that with the kids now is, and I'm sort of glad they got that in that environment. I mean, it was because I think the challenge you've got often is you don't have conversations with the kids about money, and if they're and it's important to break that barrier, isn't it? And just say, look, this is like those lessons. If I learned what I knew about money at 46, at 12, what impact would that have made? You know, that's the fundamental difference. It's really interesting. But I think the other thing that I've been thinking about a lot, particularly for the What Happens Next project, which is people reaching a certain period in life and thinking about what's next for them, is I actually think we can learn from our kids in terms of some of the attributes they've got, particularly curiosity and what do I want to do in my life, and playfulness, trying stuff that might fit with what happens next. What do you think we're going to talk a lot about what we should teach our kids and grandkids, but what do you think they can teach us about attributes that we might have lost over the years as adults?
And so I think it's a bit what you just mentioned there about curiosity and playfulness, especially about fun. I think that's the bit that we miss. And I think one of the bits that we all fall foul to, especially when we're sort of young adults, is caring about what other people think. And therefore all our money decisions are that. Whereas kids, they just want to have fun, especially younger kids. But they don't care about the materialistic stuff when they're my kids at the moment under 11. They just want to hang out with their friends, do fun things, as opposed to, I'm wearing the nicest stuff, or they've got something nicer than I do. And I think if we can hold on to that and teach and sort of go back to that and go, right, why are my kids so much happier? That all the statistics show that kids smile and laugh so much more than adults. And it's like, right, why is that? What are they doing? And I think if we have that same kind of mindset where they don't need for anything, they just out there having fun. And I think the more that we think about that and less about what other people think we should be doing, we just think about us, that kind of element will change how we spend our money. I think a lot of people.
I agree. And it's the elements that make a worthwhile life. It's not like, we know that it's not the stuff, right? We know that the stuff has a relatively small impact. And I suppose the interesting thing is that, and you've done it yourself. You've made changes, taken the family to different countries to live. So you've experienced change quite a lot, I'd imagine, throughout your life. What if somebody's thinking about what happens next and thinking about the things they should consider when they're thinking about making positive change? What are the top tips you'd think that people should know when thinking about what's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll give you a bit of context about why we did what we did. So we're in the UK, so we had a nice house, good family, we just had our first daughter, and everything was just really good. But for me, I started asking that question: what happens next? And as the time I was in my early 30s, and I kind of see my life for the next 30 years doing exactly the same as what I'd been doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just felt, okay, I just feel there's more excitement that might be able to happen. So that's why as soon as the opportunity to move to Hong Kong came up, my wife and I were like, let's just do it. But the good thing, we didn't do it just brash and just sign up. We also thought about, okay, what's the contingency? What about if this doesn't go well? And I think going through the risks of change in terms of what's going to happen next and saying, right, how is this? So we kept our house in the UK. So if we didn't like Hong Kong, we can come back, and it's not as if we've got to start from scratch. So we could rent that out. We always knew we had good reputations with our job, so we thought even if we did have to come back, we could do that. Our daughter was very young at the time, so again, wasn't going to impact on. So we thought about, right, if this goes wrong, what are the downsides and how are we going to kind of manage those? And similarly, when we were in Hong Kong and moved to Vietnam, which is probably the bigger one because you're kind of going from the safety of a corporate to being separate. But again, we still had those considerations of, if this goes wrong, what's the downside? So again, we had money saved up, so we knew we were going to be able to cover our expenses. So we didn't have that kind of worry. But again, we always thought if it doesn't work out, we can always go back to either Hong Kong or back to the UK. And actually, we kind of try and put a positive spin on it. We were like, actually, even if it does go wrong, we can have a great story.
Yeah,
and
lesson learned, right?
It's a lesson learned. And I think you'll be like, we tried that, and it was crazy, and we didn't enjoy it, and this thing happened, but for us, every time we've taken one of these moves, it's been just phenomenal. We've learned so much about different people, about ourselves. Our kids.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned during the journey, do you think?
Yeah, so I think it was kind of what we were talking about just before we came live, was when we moved to Vietnam, it was about that kind of whole community piece. So we lived in, I say, not in a big city, we lived in a place called Hoi An. And so we lived next to lots of Vietnamese families who didn't have as much as us. but they were the happiest, friendliest people. Their kids wanted to play with our kids. As if there's any issues, they would come and help us because they saw us as these like expats who didn't know what was going on, but they just wanted to help us. And we were there during COVID, and I think it was this community piece that really came to light more than I've ever seen when we're in London or in Hong Kong. And I'll give you an example. So during COVID, there's a lot of the restaurants were really struggling because they had no customers, and we got friendly with the owners, and they were like, "Oh, how can we make some more money? Have you got any ideas about how we can kind of survive through this?" And we said, "Well, at the moment you do like lunch and dinner. Why don't you start doing breakfasts? Because I know like our kids are going to school. We'll happily come and get some breakfast from you on our way." But they were like, "Oh no, we can't do that because the people across the road sell breakfasts, and we don't want to take money from them." And we're like, "Oh wow!" So it was just such a nice,
really collaborative. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think, you know, as we were chatting about before the interview, you look at other parts of the world, and what's interesting about what we're trying to do with What Happens Next is, even though we run a financial planning business, have more nuanced conversations about well-being, right? Yeah. And say, look, you know, they've been making sensible longer-term decisions about money is great, but there are other elements that you might want to consider for a happier, healthier life, including physical well-being, including social well-being, you know, spending time with people you love and like, but also including community well-being. And I look at other parts of the world, Will, and think, have we moved towards, in the West, have we moved towards a individualistic culture that has focus on success as this, you know, money as the ultimate goal, when in actual fact the route to higher well-being might be a bit more nuanced than that? What do you think?
100% agree with that, and that's again even with the sort of expats who I met both here in Thailand and in Vietnam. So I play football, and so the people I play football with, and some of them just don't earn much money. They're sort of like teaching like English as a second language, but if you compare their lives to the sort of some peers and clients, etc., in Hong Kong who earn lots of money, because my friends who I play football with are eating like the most amazing food for like £1 a meal in these kind of like little Vietnamese places. They're quite close to the beach. They've got no stress in their lives, and they're enjoying this kind of whole different culture. There's no pretentiousness. There's no one wearing designer stuff. They're just caring about relaxing, hanging out with friends and family.
How much of that is about freedom, do you think? You know, it's like that element of like, I don't, because I'd imagine part of that is like, I can do what I want. You know, there's no boss or corporate organisation or societal structure telling me I need to be in at 8 o'clock. I can do what I want. How much of that? What do you put it down to?
Yeah, no, I think it's that sense of freedom that they have, and they have, clearly it's freedom within a budget, because clearly they can't do everything that they potentially want to do because of financial constraints. But the fact they've moved to like a low cost place means that they can do most of what they want to do. Yeah, and they don't care about that. They're clearly forfeiting on going to the really posh restaurants, which cost a lot of money, because they're like, well, actually, I'd rather have my freedom and go to sort of like the local restaurants. But they're completely happy with that. But as you say, it's the choice that they've made, and they know what the upside and the downside. And I think that's just one of the bits that most people just don't think about. I think everyone just gets into this career mode. I'm going to go into career. I'm now at this status. I need to kind of show that I'm still at this status. And they don't think about, actually, if I just push this away and then go down to, I don't have to eat at Michelin star restaurants or the top expensive restaurants. I can just eat a bit more and have that freedom.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I was having a conversation with one of our other guests about this. One of the big challenges is removing, if you're a managing director of a business or you're a like senior leader or whatever, just what am I if I'm not that? and part of what happens next is coping with that change in identity more than anything else. That's like a bit existential, but often something a lot of people struggle with. And that identity change is one of the big things that people need to change. What are your top tips on managing change, though? Because you've done those changes at various times. What would be the things that you'd? And by the way, I love the pros and cons things. It's really weird. I said this to a new client yesterday. Naturally, like me as a human, I'm an optimist, right? I think everything's going to work out for the best. Professionally, I've got to be a pragmatist and sometimes a pessimist. And actually, that sounds like, well, why are we thinking about the worst case scenario? Because if the worst case scenario isn't that bad, we can do what we want. And actually, being a pessimist allows you to plan better, as you say, for those things. But managing change both emotionally and financially, what are your top tips on making sure you manage change in a way that works for you?
Yes, I think it's been that kind of planning ahead, clearly, in terms of understanding those pros and cons. But also, I think the big thing for us has been my wife and I have been a complete partnership over this. And I say I'm definitely much more of the risk-taking optimist, and my wife's a bit like. So I remember when I first told my wife, I first told my boss in Hong Kong that like, we're leaving and we're going to stop work. And the first question she asked was, "How did you convince your wife to do this?" And I was like, "Well, I've been talking about it for like 2 years." And when I first mentioned it to my wife, she was like, "No, that's a stupid idea. No one else does that." And I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." But then I kept going, "Well, what's your concerns, etc." And then so she helped me get to that bit. So I think it's about and I think it's that managing change means managing not just yourself, but managing who's going to be impacted.
The relationship, who's come with you along the way.
And given those different views about, what about if one of us doesn't like it? And then we're like, right, we have to decide that now. We don't want to be there and try to decide that. We're like, right, so we'll do it for 3 years. And if one of us doesn't like it, that's it, we're coming back. Kind of bit. So it's a lot about that plan. But it's just about the mindset was the big bit about the change. It's like, why are we doing this? And just then getting excited about it. Like going,
this is an adventure, right?
It's going to be an adventure. And I say it's only going to be potentially only a small part of our lives. We're like, got whatever, 100 years, even if we do it for 3 years, or 3 years out of our lives. But it could be a catalyst for that. So we always went with, right, we're going to plan, but we want to go with a really positive mindset and again, seek others. But a really interesting thing was that when we spoke to other people about it, so I remember talking to my parents, and my parents were like, "Why are you doing this? Like, you've got everything good. Like, we'd love to have been in your position when we were in the UK. Why are you changing?" And so it was a bit of resistance. And even though our friends were a little bit cautious about why you're changing. And so we had to sort of put that to a side and think about what's best for us and not for them. And now my parents are like, we tell them about our lifestyle. They're like, "Oh, it's amazing." They're trying to get my sister to do something similar. So it's much more about mindset and that. And so
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's like your mum and dad had that route, and I think over time, as we have, I remember a couple of years ago being in probably 2019, I reckon, being in Gibraltar with my dad, and my dad's 75 now, so he was late 60s, early 70s then. And we sat down just for something to eat, and we were having a conversation with somebody who was sitting on the table opposite. And we were going, "Oh, so what are you doing in Gibraltar?" She went, "Well, I'm here for 3 months." So I was like, "All right, for work?" She went, "Well, I'm a digital nomad, and I work where I want because I work online and I can travel and stuff like that." It blew my dad's mind. He was like, "What? What? You could just..." And I think actually technology, even though I think we've got to be careful about the role it plays in our lives, is an empowering force as well, because of the fact that it allows us to manage work life in a way that that we wouldn't be having. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, no,
it's that sort of stuff. I want to have a conversation about, because the people who are thinking about what happens next, and have probably done pretty well financially and saved and accumulated wealth, and now at a point where they're thinking about what happens next. But like your example you gave earlier, I want to make sure they pass not only assets, but also that knowledge and experience onto their kids. So what are your top tips to make sure that we enable and empower the next generation of our families to make sure they know what they need to know?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Apart from by the book, which clearly they all should do.
Clearly,
right?
yes. But I think there's two. But one of the bits, especially if the context that you've mentioned there about families who might already have some wealth, and it kind of goes back to that Vanderbilt story, is I hear a lot of stories where they're saying, well, we're saving for our kids or our grandchildren's via junior ISAs or junior SIPs, which I think is fantastic. But actually, it's the knowledge that is more important than the actual amount of money. I know it's like, well, we'll give it to them on their 18th birthday. So we're not telling them about it, but we'll give it to them on their 18th. And I'm like, oh, no, please do not do that. Make sure they know about it so they can start planning about it, understanding how to manage that money. Or otherwise, children become, if they get money on their 18th birthday as a surprise, it's a bit like winning the lottery. And we all sadly know how good lottery winners are with their money, because they don't get
remove the stigma as well, right? Remove the just have open conversations so it normalizes that element instead of that's the education, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's also about the sort of taking ownership of that money as well. I think because when we're talking about children and learning about money, there's so many different topics you can talk to kids about, whether that's like debt, but actually it's about the actions that is the most important bit. And this is what I talk a lot about in my blogs and kind of allude to in the book as well. It's not about just kids having knowledge and about money. It's about what actions do they take. And so getting kids just to start to save a little bit of money every time that they get some is probably the most powerful thing that you can get kids to do. Not just, oh, my kids read these books and they know all about all the different jargons and they've read about investing and stuff like that. It's like, well, that's all good.
Simple habits, isn't it?
Yeah, if they're not investing every single time they get some money, even if it's just a small amount, or saving a little bit every time, and they're not into that habit, it's really hard to start to get them into the habit when they're older. And so the more they do that now. Sorry. Get that into those habits and actions, and that's the most powerful thing that I think parents or grandparents can do.
You know what's really interesting? I sort of that sort of happened to me accidentally through work. So I started a job at 19 in my local building society, and on my first pay slip, I think they took like £60 out for my pension. And I went straight to the branch manager and said that £60 is like 2 nights in the pub. And it's that 18-year-old, 19-year-old Chris had that perspective on it. And she was really clever, Will, because she turned around to me and said, I'm not saying no, if you want to cancel it, but you need to go and have a chat with the financial advisor, financial planner who was in the branch at the time. And she said, I'm going to say don't do it. And I'm going to say you'll thank me. You won't thank me now because you're missing out on 2 nights in the pub a month, but you'll thank me in 20 years' time. And that was definitely true. It's interesting, isn't it, when you're like sort of, but you've got to you've got to share those experiences, because kids and grandkids can't zoom out that long because they haven't been around that long. And it's that element of sharing those stories which is, I think really, really important. Do you think practical skills? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to just say on that, I think it's just the key piece about that, particularly about saving, is it only has to be a little bit. So I'm hoping that those two nights in the pub were not the only night opportunity to go to the pub, and I hope you still got opportunities with the other money to go to a couple of times. It's just you missed out on the extra two, and I think that's a really important thing, because I think when it comes to saving and spending, people see it so binary. There's like, I'm a spender or I'm a saver, and it's like, no, you should definitely be both.
There's nuance.
And be spend, but just a little bit. At one night or two nights at the pub, as long as you get to go with friends and stuff, and it's not going to have a big impact. I think that's the key, is to get kids to know.
And I agree. I mean, I think all of this is about balance, isn't it? You know, and like if actually going out with friends at any age is going to improve your social well-being, actually, then that's worth considering as a net win. But then it's just making sure everything's balanced. But it's what's interesting, and I've read one of your blogs on this about good value, is thinking about how we spend money to improve our well-being. Because I think often, as you've alluded to, those designer labels and all that sort of stuff don't always contribute as much as we think to positive well-being. So tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about that story, and how do we, if we're thinking about what happens next in our lives, work out what constitutes good value?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important one, because most people spend money to impress other people, and I think that's where people getting into traps where they're over leveraging. And I talk to my daughters about spending all the time, and I want them to spend, and I want them to spend on things that are going to benefit them or people around them, and sort of say, okay, why are you going to buy that? And just asking that simple question, why are you buying this, is so powerful. And so, as in that blog that you refer to, I talk about going to like fancy restaurants or nice restaurants. And some people, one of my friends, he's a fantastic cook, and he just doesn't want to go to restaurants. He's like, why do I go to a fancy restaurant? I can cook something as good at home for a lot cheaper. I just don't see good value in it. So, and he's like, and others are like, he's another friend who's also a good cook, but he likes to go to restaurants because he likes to learn and try different tastes and stuff. And he really values the kind of learning experience from it and the social. And I like just going to nice restaurants because I don't like cooking. and so I see the value in someone preparing a meal for me. And it's all about why are you doing that? And I think a lot of people spend, especially cars. Like I've got a friend who's, my dad was the same. They spend a lot of money on cars, but they love cars. They really love cars. They're not doing it to impress other people. There's always going to be a little bit of that comes with it. But they love the cars. They love reading the magazines. They know everything about it. Whereas others I know have just bought a car because they're like, I'm successful and this is what I'm doing. But then there's all of the debt that comes with that. And there's the higher insurances. There's the higher maintenance. There's all the extra bits that come with that. And so I'm with my daughters. I'm like, right, spend your money. What do you want to spend it on? And if like my daughters at the moment are really into sort of some books, so they're just buying like all of David Walliams' books is what they're buying at the moment. And then, especially here in Thailand, they're not that cheap to buy, but they're really enjoying it. I'm like, go for it, go. And it's about enjoying it and why they're buying it. I think that's especially because one of the lessons and I've only learned it about recently is the Diderot effect. So this is the French philosopher who had a nice life, but he didn't have much, and he had this office, and then someone gifted him a fancy dressing gown, and so he enjoyed it, and he was like, and he put it in his down on his office chair, and he went, it kind of doesn't fit with my office chair, so I'm going to go and buy a nice office chair. And so he bought a nice office chair, and he went, oh, my office chair doesn't fit with my desk. So he bought a nicer desk, and soon enough he changed his whole office. He ended up in debt, and he was like, I'm now just I'm held hostage to this kind of value of this fancy dress. He's like, I wish I'd never have bought that expensive.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
And it's like one expensive thing leads to another.
It's that conversation around freedom again, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like, is money the slave or the, like sort of, I mean, if you strip it all back to the basics, it's really interesting. Chris Budd, who we've had on the show talking about financial well-being, has got a really simple phrase, which is, work out what makes you happy and spend money on that. And I think that's interesting, but also that element of comparison is one of the big downfalls when it comes to happiness, right? It's just one of those things where you go, when have you ever turned around and gone, oh, they're doing that, I need to do that, and it's made you happy? It's just, I don't think it works.
And it's really hard because it's kind of a one-way ratchet in terms of it's easy to spend more. So if, for example, you buy a car that's, you're like, oh, I've got a pay rise or a bonus, I'm going to buy this car that's slightly nicer than what I can probably afford, but I can just about afford it. But then you buy it, and then you have to buy the nice clothes to go with the nice car, because you don't want to be in like a BMW, but in your like cheap clothes. You're like, oh, and then you want to go to nice places, so you drive and show off to the sort of. So your whole lifestyle gets this huge inflation.
Yeah, pressure. And the challenge you've got is as you earn more, there's that lifestyle creep often, isn't there? That goes up with it. Really even though you were happy before.
Yeah, and it's really hard to come back down, because you're essentially saying to people, actually, I couldn't really afford that. And now I've now gone back, and that's so hard. So what I really want for my kids and all other kids is to understand this. Allow yourself to enjoy your pay rise. I'm not saying don't ever spend more, but it's always make sure you live below your means, even if it's just below.
within your means, so that you're saving a bit for the future as well and giving yourself that freedom. And you do you, right? Like as you say, somebody who's into cars might think that's a really good investment, because they will spend hours engaged in that, like research and stuff like that. But not one for me, that one. I'm my car experience is low. One thing that I'm really interested in, and it's funny because you were talking about sort of your mum and dad earlier, is that element of thinking about role models and thinking about what other people are doing, learning lessons from that, but not directly comparing. So I suppose the interesting thing is, let's say, for example, you've got, and I did this with a client a few weeks ago, when they came in and we talked about how we might be able to help. What I was curious about is why now? What was the reason they came in at that particular point in time? And they had a couple of friends who were moving towards what happens next in their life, semi-retired and thinking about what happens next. And they said, we've been thinking about it for a little while, but the fact that Steve and Joe had done it meant that we'd been thinking about it in a bit more focus. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes there's role models and there's a positive nudge, and there's that impact of comparison of turning around and going, well, why are they doing it? Do you reckon there is a positive role model and a positive nudge that can move your actions in the right direction? And how do we do that without getting that impact of comparison?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think we can definitely all learn. And then but it's also, it's trying to understand, how does that apply to me? I'm not just doing it because they've done that. So I'll give you an example. So again, when we left Hong Kong to go to Vietnam, I say one of the bits was that conversation I had with a client saying kids are, but there's also another gentleman who was in his 60s, and he lived very close to us, and he had a very young daughter. And he was spending we always saw him and his daughter together. And I remember talking to him, and he was saying that it's his second marriage, and he's got older grown-up kids. And he was saying at that time, his first sort of family he had, he didn't see that much. He was like, I'm going to go and work. I'm going to give them the life that I never had. So he worked, and felt he was doing the right thing. But ultimately, his marriage broke down, and he never saw his kids. And so he's now sadly on his second family. He's like, I'm going to spend as much time as I can with my daughter. I care more about that. And that really impacted me. I was like, right, almost like as a bit of a
learn from that now, right?
It's like, okay, right, I don't want to be that person. Therefore, I want to take action now to avoid. So I think there's role models, both positive and negative, that you learn from, and say, right, well, actually, I do want to be like that person. I want to have that freedom, and so that's kind of reading the books, and then you've got the like real life ones where you go, actually, if I don't change, then that potentially could happen to me. And then just seeing different people doing things can be a huge catalyst to others, and that's what I've really enjoyed about coming out into different places, and especially again moving out of the corporate world and meeting lots of new people. And they've also, in Vietnam, they all came from different places, so you're talking to them and you're like, well, how come, why are you here? It's a bit like why your clients come to see you at that point. And they've all got different stories, and some of that's they fell in love with someone, or they had something bad happened, or someone like, I just wanted to make a change, positive, great opportunity came up. And it's just really interesting to see that there's all these catalysts coming in. Whereas I think that's when people are in the corporate world, they don't get to see that. They're kind of isolated because pretty much everyone else is doing exactly the same as what they're doing. Everyone sort of finishes university and then goes and gets a corporate job, and then they'll retire when they're 65. And it's trying to inject at some point in their lives.
Trying to poke that bubble, right? And go, okay, so if somebody's watching this and they're in that bubble, what's the first step for them to go, where do I get that alternative perspective on what life might look like for me?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think it's about, so for me, it would be, what kind of lifestyle do you want? And so is it a case of, I like
how
my
do you want to spend your time, right?
Yeah, how do you want to spend your time? Do you want to be not working and therefore, but have a kind of relax? So you kind of got to think about what your compromises are. And there's always going to be compromises. And it's about, well, what are you willing to compromise on? And so if you're happy to say, well, actually, I don't need fancy stuff. I just want to be able to do what I want when I want. Okay, well, then you start thinking about what countries have got a lower cost of living, and especially if they've got like real estate in the UK and you can rent that out, and pretty much that's your income. For places like Southeast Asia or even some parts of Europe. So there's a lot of people moving to like Portugal, etc. But some people might not want to move overseas. So for us, that's what's really exciting for us. We wanted to see that, because we've been visiting these countries and felt, actually, I'd love to be able to stay there full time. But
you know what I'm really curious about is that, what's the difference for you? Because I feel like this is a bit of a counselling session, Will, because I'm sharing with what our financial plan is. But the interesting thing is, like, you visit as a tourist, and the experience you get, I'd imagine, is completely different from when you live in a place. So help me understand sort of what that difference is, and where, like, by staying in one place for 2 or 3 years, what you've learned compared to going in and flying in and then flying out.
Yeah, so when we first, so I'll take Hoi An, which is the place in Vietnam that we lived. So we went there from Hong Kong, and we stayed right in the center because that's where the tourists all go, and we were tourists. But we loved the food, you could tell that people were just very, very friendly, and so we're like, and we loved the settings. And so, but we didn't really know what it was going to be like to live there. But then as soon as we did move there, and again, we got to get into the community side of it, we hardly ever went to the tourist areas at all, because that's where all the tourists were, and we were like, we started to find...
We're not tourists anymore, we live here now.
Yeah, exactly. And so we would then go to the sort of different restaurants that are outside the main town, and got to know the people. So the bit for us was, we still had access to the bits that we moved there. We kind of got a sense of what are the bits that we really like. So it's not, we love this restaurant, we want to go into that restaurant. It's like, we love the food, the people are really nice, we love the kind of pace of life that we could observe. And the fact that it was just very different from what we were used to. But it's really interesting. It didn't take very long before the sort of craziness of driving a little scooter rather than driving a car, there being like pigs randomly on the road or like chickens everywhere, became quite normal. And it didn't take very long. And so that was a big surprise for us, is that we moved out of so we're a bit more in the suburb bits, but we got used to it and exploring. And that was the bit that, even we were there for 3 years in a relatively small place, we still found that we were exploring. And that's what made it so exciting for us. And the same thing now that we've moved to Thailand, we've got that same kind of mindset that we still go to the main town bit every now and then. But actually, we're exploring the sort of different restaurants and just going for drives and going, wow, there's this crazy restaurant that's amazing. It's not on any of the tourists.
Or here's this view, or
the view, it's the way in which, so yeah, it's just that ability. But you have to like the core bits to start with, and then it kind of just expands from that.
Love it. Tell me a bit about, because that was the other big change that a lot of people thinking about what happens next are thinking about doing is leaving that corporate role and maybe not moving into a conventional retirement because they want to stay intellectually active and engaged. Some people don't. Some people want to stop work permanently, but often either as a transition or as something in that next phase of their life, they're thinking about how to continue to stay intellectually engaged. Work might play a part of that, but the nature of that work changes because they don't want to they want the freedom to work how they want to work. And you've gone through that shift, so have I. And it's scary sometimes. What would you recommend if somebody was thinking about shifting from an employed role to something a bit more flexible?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, because I say we didn't do it from a financial point of view of I wanted to start something just to sort of generate lots of, I clearly want to, I do, and I want to make money from the sort of doing Blue Tree. But my biggest thing for it was what do I enjoy? What do I think I'll be good at? But also, what's going to be helpful to others as well? And I think that's been the biggest thing for me personally. As when you're in the corporate world, you do get your thank yous.
Right?
Yeah, you get your thank yous from like your boss every now and then if you do a good job, and occasionally a client, but also you're being paid to do it, so you should do a good job, and your clients are paying you, so they expect you to do a good job. So you don't get that. Whereas what we're doing now is I just love the fact that I'm helping people, and I get random messages saying, "Oh, I've read your blog. Thank you. We're now starting to do this," or "Thank you for your book," and stuff. And I'm like, "Oh," and I never asked for this kind of all set up, but that's been the biggest thing for me, is to be doing something that I'm enjoying and that is helping people, and it drives me on so much. And I'm guessing the same thing for yourself, Chris. In terms,
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I've been thinking about this quite a lot in terms of sort of what gets me out of bed in the morning, what I enjoy, and what I love to do. And for me, I think the bit. And we've been lucky to build a really, really good business and have really great relationships with clients we like. And I wouldn't change it for the world. But what's really important to me, and it's different for us all, and funny enough, we've got an interview with a lady called Jane Thomas coming up, who's going to be talking to us in a bit more depth about different motivations for different people. For me, my motivation is definitely positive impact. So what difference is what we do having on individuals' lives? And it's interesting. I've started a new habit this year of journaling. So just like every morning thinking about sort of where I'm going, what I want to do, and what I'm grateful for is a big one for me at the minute, because I've got loads that, as you said, I'm sort of I really should be grateful for and am grateful for. I've been incredibly lucky. But the question that I ask myself at the end of every journal section every morning is, what positive impact am I making today? Now, interestingly, that question might be different for other people, but what I've come to realise, it's taken me 46 years to get there, Will, is what I've come to realise is positive impact is my get out of bed stuff. That's where it is. And I'd encourage people watching this, people who listen to this interview later, just to think about what's your version of positive impact? What's the reason you get out of bed every morning and do what you do? Because it's not an easy question to answer, but certainly one worth thinking about, I think. What do you think?
100%. And I think that's, so in terms of, from my own perspective, so I say when I was working in the corporate world, I was advising these very, very large institutions on like millions, sometimes billions of dollars, and clearly the impact. But actually, it's felt very far removed about my advice and what actually gets implemented and who actually is the end beneficiaries. Whereas now I'm kind of advising on £5 pocket money, but I'm hoping that I can kind of know who that person is and what impact that might have. And
interestingly, even though the scales are different, the impact often when you're doing it on an individual basis, it's way more tangible, right? You can see it, feel it, and hear it straight away, and it's like, yeah, it's an interesting one. Will, I've really enjoyed today, and really looking forward to sharing this with our audience. Tell us a little bit about where people can find out about your work.
Sure. So my website is bluetreesavings.com. So on there I have about my generally weekly blog to help parents teach their kids about some money topic, my book, and some of the sort of online pieces. I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot, so just look up Will Rainey and it should pop up. So that's my main social, and I try and put a few posts up, again, to help parents teach kids about money. So yeah, LinkedIn and my website are the two main places that you'll find me and more about the kind of work that I'm doing with parents.
Right. Well, thank you, Will, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. Hopefully you've got loads of insights. I know I have. So really appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time on What Happens Next.
If you've enjoyed this interview and you're looking for more from What Happens Next, there's one place you can find everything. Simply visit whathappensnext.life for all of the interviews we've done so far, the opportunity to take the quiz, the opportunity to sign up for the waiting list for the book, and much, much more. So that was that episode. I really, really enjoyed a lot about speaking to Will about a bunch of different stuff. Such a diverse and interesting conversation. Hopefully you did too. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you on the What Happens Next podcast soon.